today, these are the sum and difference identities, and you're going to notice there are 6 different identities. You only wrote down 3, but each one of those contains 2. And so you're probably wondering, what do these plus and minuses mean? What does all this mean? Okay, so first of all, this is the sign of alpha plus or minus beta. Alpha plus or minus beta is just an angle, okay, any angle. So it could be like 10 plus 30, okay, 45 plus 50. That's all A and alpha and beta refer to as angles, okay. This plus or minus is just a way for us to write 2 formulas as one. That's it. So if I notice it's the sine of alpha, so sine of whatever my first angle is, cosine of whatever my second angle is, and then notice how these signs correlate. If I add the 2 angles together, I add these 2 quantities together. Okay? If I subtract the 2 angles at the start, I subtract the 2 quantities. And then notice it's just the cosine of the first angle, which is alpha, and the sine of the second angle, which is beta. That's it. Okay? Now the cosine one is a little different. There is not a typo on here. This is actually correct. And if you look at this one, this is different because this says the cosine of alpha plus or minus beta. So if I do the cosine of alpha plus beta, that's going to equal the cosine of alpha, which is the first angle, times the cosine of the second angle, minus. That's why that minus sign is on the top. Whatever operations are on the top, those match. Whatever ones are on the bottom, those match. And then the sine of the first angle times the sine of the second angle. So how is cosine different? If I subtract the 2 angles, I add the 2 quantities. So see how that works? Okay, tangent's the odd one out because it's just the weird looking one. Okay, tangent of alpha plus, so if I add those 2, I'm going to add tangent A plus tangent B, and then look at what I'm doing on the bottom. I'm doing the opposite sign. I'm subtracting. Okay, and then last but not least, if I subtract the 2 angles here, I subtract the ones on top and do the opposite on the bottom. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at an example. You're going to need your blue sheet, by the way. Find the exact value of sine of 75. So on your blue sheet, you need to find for me 2 angles that either add or subtract to 75 degrees. 2 angles that either add or subtract to 75 degrees. 30 and 45. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take sine. Okay, and so what those correlate to is 30 correlates to alpha, 45 correlates to beta in our formula. And so I'm just going to take the sine of the first angle, the sine of alpha, times the cosine of the second angle, or the cosine of beta, plus the cosine of the first angle, alpha, times the sine of the second angle, beta. So it's just a matter of plugging in those angles into the formula. And this is the thing. The only one that's the odd one out is cosine. So cosine doesn't go. Cosine, if you add the 2 angles, you subtract the 2 quantities. It's the opposite. So now, using your blue sheet, I need to know what the sine of 30 is. 1/2. What's the cosine of 45? Good. What is the cosine of 30? And what's the sine of 45? Okay, so all I have to do now is simplify that. And then we're done. So the first quantity, I've got 1 times root 2 in the numerator, which is root 2. Denominator is 2 times 2, which is 4. Here I've got root 3 times root 2 on the top, which will be root 6 divided by 4. And then last but not least, you notice denominators are the same, correct? So you add the roots. So you get root 2 plus root 6 all over 4. And that's as simple as you can get. No, you cannot make it root 8. And that's it. Because it's like you're adding an x and a y. Those are 2 different things, right? You only make your atoms if the roots are the same. So we're going to look at another one. Okay, that's one type of your problem that you're going to have today. This one's the cosine of 15 degrees. So once again, you're going to use your blue chart. You're going to find two angles that either add or subtract to 15 degrees. What do you get? 45 minus 30. Okay? So if I take 45 minus 30, I get the cosine of 45, which is cosine of A or alpha, cosine of beta. Okay, remember with cosine you do the opposite sign. So I'm going to add, and then sine of 45 times sine of 30. Okay, so remember with cosine the signs are opposite. So all I need to do now is plug in what I know. What's the cosine of 45? Root 2 over 2. And you're going to notice, you're going to be saying a lot of these numbers, they're going to be the same answers throughout your problems. What's cosine of 30? Okay. Sine of 45? And sine of 30. 1/2. So see how slick that works? Like I said, you're going to be using root 3 over 2, root 2 over 2, and 1/2 a lot. I should get root 6 over 4 plus root 2 over 4. So your final answer is what? Yep, root 6 plus root 2 all over 4. Questions? That's the first part of your homework. All right, the next part of your homework is this. So actually those first two problems were what we were going to do yesterday. Okay, and these are actually not hard. Yeah. So let's go ahead and look at this one. This says find the exact value. So remember, exact value meant like no decimals. Possibly. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this one. You'll see. So what I'm looking at with this whole big expression, I need to figure out which of the three does this match. Does it match sine? Does it match cosine? Or does it match tangent? So which one does this match? Cosine, because cosine went in the pattern cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Okay. Sine went in the pattern sine, cosine, cosine, sine. And then tangent was just the odd one. Tangent had a fraction. So I've got the cosine here. And so what I'm going to do is now write down the two angles that I'm dealing with. 7 pi over 8 and 5 pi over 24. Now I need to decide, am I going to add those two angles or subtract those two angles? You're going to add because cosine is opposite. Remember, cosine is the one that's the opposite. So now what I need to do is I need to add those two angles together. Now this is the easy way. Remember what we do? We leave the pi out and we just add the two fractions. So we add 7/8 and 5/24. So what do you get when you add 7/8 and 5/24? And you can even use your calculator for this if you need. Which is? Which is? 13/12. Okay? So really my angle is 13 pi over 12. Do you have that on your blue sheet?
No.
No. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and stop that. Because you don't have the exact value on your blue sheet. If you have that on your blue sheet, you have to answer what it in fact is on your blue sheet.
In degrees?
Well, example, if this was cosine of pi over 4, you would look at your blue sheet and see that cosine of pi over 4 is in fact root 2 over 2. And that is what your answer would be. And you'll see that on the next one. Okay? So which one does this fit? Tangent. Okay, so I've got tangent. I'm going to write my two angles down. They're 32 and 13. And now I got to decide, do I add those two or do I subtract those two? So if you remember, tangent matched up with whatever your top one was. So since, well, it matches up. So since this one is add up here on the top, I'm going to add these two angles. Okay? The bottom one was the opposite. So I end up with tangent of what degree? Mm-hmm. 45. So can you evaluate tangent of 45 using your blue sheet? The answer is yes. What is your answer? There you go. Nope. As long as you have your blue sheet, you should be good. Now this is the last type of problem for this section we're going to look at, and then we're going to look at two more that go into another part of your homework. Which one does this fit, folks? Sine. So once again, I'm going to write sine, and I'm going to go ahead and put my two angles, which are 4x and 2x. So now I'm going to look at the sine here. Minus, good, because sine holds true. It is whatever operation you're given. So my answer is sine of 2x. So do you have a 2x somewhere on your blue sheet? No. So you stop right there, and that's your answer. The last two problems, okay? Notice it says to verify each identity. And so this one we're going to go ahead and verify. I'll let you get that down and then we'll continue. All right, so verify each identity. We're going to pick the most complicated side. The most complicated side is what? The left side. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this out using the cosine formula. This is like my alpha. This is like my beta. Okay. So I get cosine of pi times cosine of theta. What do I do for my operation? What do I do? Minus or plus? Plus, very good. Sine of pi, sine of theta. The reason why we use plus is because this is cosine. And remember that whatever sine I do here,
Like on that, I don't know.
okay, so all I did is I expanded out the cosine formula there.
Oh, so you use that as
Yeah. Okay. So then now I need to know what is the cosine of pi using your blue sheets. -1. What is the sine of pi using your blue sheets? 0. So now let's figure out what I end up having. I have -1 times cosine, which is negative cosine. I have 0 times sine, which is 0. So I end up having negative cosine equals negative cosine, and I am done. So this is kind of one of those essay questions. I look at your work and make sure that your steps match up. We've got one more to look at, and I'm going to warn you. Okay, this one, it doesn't take a lot of lines, it just takes a lot of width. Okay, it'll actually take us about 2 or 3 lines is all. So I'll let you go ahead and get that done. This is our very last one. So I'm going to start with this right here. And I'm going to expand this just like I did in the previous problem. So to expand that, I know that I have sine of pi over 6, cosine of x. What operation will I use with sine? Plus cosine pi over 6, sine of x. So that was just from what I've underlined in the purple. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this one right here. Okay. So with this one, I get sine of pi over 6, cosine x. What operation will I use? Minus, because remember, that's the sine. So cosine of pi over 6, sine of x. And I want to show that that equals cosine of x. Just spit that one in. What do you notice?
Cancel.
What cancels?
Everything.
Cosine pi over 6 sine of x. Negative cosine pi over 6 sine x.
Again.
Those cancel, so these are gone. So let's look at what I'm left with. Sine of pi over 6 times cosine x. What is the sine of pi over 6 times sine of pi over 6? Using your blue sheet.
1/2.
So I have 1/2 times cosine x. Oh, what do I notice here? Sine of pi over 6 is 1/2 cosine x. I want to show that that equals cosine x. Well, what do you know about 1/2 plus 1/2? It equals 1. So I know that that just equals cosine x. And I am done. Now, you have 20 problems from this section. Okay, so for those of you that are here tomorrow and not at one act, you'll have time to work. Those of you that are at one act, you might want to get together. If you have time throughout the day at all, maybe one of you could organize and say, somebody bring their book, and then you could work on those together if you need. But these are the problems. 1 through 6, 11 through 16, 18 through 21, 36, 38, 40, and 42.